And we are live.
Good evening, everybody. Mayor Kevin Davis, City of Brantford, would like to welcome all of you to a very special City Council meeting that we're having tonight. And if you're able, I'd ask if you could stand while we read the invocation, which is how we start every meeting. Kind of like the reading of principles. Thank you. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. And we also attempt not to forget those who served our communities in the past and who the work we must continue to do in their memory. So please be seated. And I'd like to make, since this is a very special occasion, I'd like to make a few opening comments. But first of all, I want to thanking everyone who is here present tonight. Good evening. Welcome. Sego, I think it is. And I want to begin by explaining that tonight's special council meeting is exclusively dedicated to a very important and emotional subject. Acknowledging the city's proximity to the largest population of Indigenous peoples in Canada and our shared grief for victims of the residential school system, as well as the survivors and their families, tonight we will hear from survivors of the Mohawk Institute Residential School directly about their experiences and how, together with the Survivor Secretariat, they're calling upon the federal and provincial governments to release all the documents related to the former Mohawk Institute Residential School to the Survivor Secretariat. I'm proud to share that last month, the City of Brantford opened its archives to the research team working with the Survivor Secretariat in order to assist with the search efforts. And researchers were on site here at City Hall for 2 days in April. And thanks to the city's records team, we've got a pretty good records team here, they're able to review the documents such as we have them that have relevant information. We simply implore the federal and provincial governments to do the same. Now I'd like to call upon the City of Brantford's first ever Indigenous Affairs Advisor, Lucas Isaacs, for a few comments.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I'm proud to be here along with members of council and my fellow city staff to demonstrate the city's solidarity with Indigenous communities as our nation continues to mourn the unearthing of unmarked graves on the grounds of the former residential school sites across Canada. To move forward in the spirit of healing and reconciliation, the City of Brantford recognizes how important it is to ensure that the truth of what happened here is remembered, and that the current and future generations of Canadians understand the residential school has many impacts on our peoples. Thank you to my colleagues and the members of council for this important opportunity for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis survivors. Now I turn it back to you, Mayor Davis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucas. And I wanted to acknowledge that there are some in our community that struggle with feelings of grief, sorrow, and anger related to this subject matter. And I want to indicate for the benefit of those who may not be aware, I know those who are here tonight know of it, but there are support services in place to help. There is the residential schools crisis line available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for anyone experiencing pain or distress as a result of their residential school experience. And the information is on the screen. There is the line, and of course, there's Indigenous Victim Services at Six Nations of the Grand River for those who may need that assistance. But with that, I'd like to move into the formal business of this evening. Before we do that, there are a couple of procedural matters we have to deal with. First of all, tonight we have with us, helping us, Tanya Daniels, who is our city clerk, and behind us, Melanie Figueredo. And Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll for attendance?
Certainly. Councillor Wall.
Present.
Councillor Antosky. Here. Councillor Vanderstel.
Present.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Sokoli.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Van Tilborg.
Present.
Counselor Sless,
Present.
and Mayor Davis.
Present. Thank you. I'd like to remind members of council, we do have a hybrid meeting format where people can participate electronically. And we have a set of rules in respect to those. And basically means that all members of council must keep their video on and their microphones off until requested by the chair members of the council to speak. Before we move into receiving delegations tonight, if I could indicate at this point if anybody has a conflict of interest regarding the item on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to declare that conflict. Seeing no raised hands. We'll move then into presentations, delegations. So we do have one item on tonight's agenda, and we do have 4 registered delegations this evening. And that is in accordance with our rules that someone applies to become a delegate before 9 p.m. at each morning of the meeting. So we have 4. And I'd ask then if we do have a couple of rules about delegations, and one of which is that a delegate has up to 10 minutes to provide their presentation. And if there's a need to extend, you can indicate to that, and the members of council can consider whether to extend the time if that's your wish. But let's start with, we have 4, and Dawn Hill is the first person who would like to speak, and she is here in person. So Dawn, if you could please come forward. Yes, it can. We can raise or lower the table and the microphone. Red light means yours is the hot microphone. So.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everybody could hear, and I guess you can. I'd like to say good evening to Mayor Davis. Just met him this evening, and councillors and those in the audience that are attending here. So if you don't know me, my name is Dawn Hill. I'm from Six Nations, and I'm a former residential school. They call them survivors, but we tend to call ourselves thrivers. I attended in 1957 to 1961. And later in life, I became an elementary school teacher and retired in 2015. But I'm not really here to talk about me. So I'm here today to speak to the Brantford City Council, the mayor in particular, who I had to look up stuff because I didn't know him. And I thought, well, okay, what makes a mayor such an important person? And I found out that he was did a lot of public service and had a very good track record in all of those fields that he has been in. So I was kind of impressed with that, kind of. And so on behalf of Survivor Secretariat, I'm here to request a few things. So, but if you don't know what the Survivor Secretariat is, it's a survivor-led, not-for-profit organization mandated to organize and support the efforts to uncover, document, and share the truth about the deaths of children at the Mohawk Institute, which is where I was, during its 136 years of operation. And I know that the city of Brantford and Six Nations have been neighbors for many, many years, not always in a amicable way, but always being sorted out in one way or another. But I see that things are really changing, and I'm really glad for that. But I'm not like, I was telling Mayor Davis here that I'm not a political person. And so I don't find that I'm addressing any of those issues. I'm glad that there's a council here in the city of Brantford to meet with us from Six Nations. And I know that, as you had said earlier, and you kind of took the wind out of my sails, because I thought, oh, I'm going to say this, but you've already kind of addressed it. And that was about handing over the records from the city of Brantford, and the fact that you sent over the LiDAR scan of the city grounds, which came to us And I remember seeing that, and I was quite impressed with that at the time, because when the board meets, we look at all kinds of things. And so I thought, oh, isn't that kind of neat? You know, nobody said you had to do it, but you did. And so that helped us. And so we're just trying to put everything to in order so that we can move along as a group and basically find if there are and where they are missing children, where possible those burial sites might be. And unfortunately, because the grounds from the former Mohawk Institute covered a lot more area than you see now. So it does interfere with a lot of like the buildings and structures around Brantford. And so that was really important to us to have that information. So I guess it's our hope, Mayor Davis and councillors, that you will consider using your influence and connections to, and you mentioned this too, I said you took the wind out of my sails, to address to other municipalities, the provincial and federal government, to hand over their records, because that will help everybody, not just Six Nations, but all those other communities and all of the other Native communities, and there are over 30 Native communities that had their children taken or sent to the Mohawk Institute. So we're hoping that you're going to be able to influence your neighbors. And we talk about, I know you've got a group called Friends and Neighbors, and I don't know, I've met some of them, but being in good neighbors, we're hoping that we're on the right path between the two communities to be good neighbors, you know, that we can help each other, because that's the whole point of being neighbors and developing friendships when you cooperate with one another. And so that's all I really wanted to say, that I'm hoping that will continue. And thank you very much for listening.
So Don, we may have, some of the council members may have some questions for you.
Mhm.
So any questions for Don?
And you can ask me anything. I'll answer.
Yep. Councillor Sicoli.
Hi, Don.
Hi.
Is there anything that you need that we haven't given you yet?
As far as like in our discussions, I think the biggest thing was the fact that you handed over records of anything that pertained to the Mohawk Institute. And if you've done that, that is really great. You know, and the LIDAR thing, or if you have any other things like that, anything that pertains to the Mohawk Institute and the not only the children, but probably the adults that were there as well. I don't know if that's something legally you can do or not, but we're going to request that, you know, because there was a lot of people that did work at the Institute that had not such a good history. And so anything that comes to light like that, again, not just with Brantford, but other municipalities and the provincial and federal government, because we're still asking for those records and any of those kind of things. And I think the big thing is that we all want to put this to rest at some point, and it won't be soon. We know that, because there's a lot of work that has to be done all around Brantford and maybe other, excuse me, other areas as well.
Thank you for taking the time today to come out.
Don, I've got a couple of questions for you. So have the federal and provincial governments, have they produced any records?
I really can't answer that.
Okay. Maybe Scott.
I know they've been requested,
right?
But I really can't tell you for sure. I'd have to go back and read all those records again. I mean, because we get every time we have new stuff delivered, we do go through it all, and you know, you have reams and reams of paperwork, and so I can't say that I really remember everything. I would hope that they do, but I think the point is that we're trying to encourage them to do that. So to me, it didn't sound like they did. Just
but you believe they have more records?
Yes, actually we do, and the churches as well. And I know that we're requesting, because this was an Anglican run institution, that we didn't really want to talk to the Archbishop. We didn't want a photo op of him talking to us. I know some people did go to Toronto to meet him from Six Nations, but as a group, the Survivors Secretariat came to the conclusion that unless you want to answer specific questions and that you're really going to help, then we don't really need to talk to you. And I mean, it might sound kind of harsh, but it wasn't meant to be. We're trying to get to the bottom of all of these things. And if you've got records, which they do in England, that we need those records. You know, they might be from way in the past, but we still need those records because we're trying to find all of the children that have been identified or even not even identified, but are missing, not unaccounted for. So.
Thank you very much, Don.
Okay.
Well, Councilor Carpenter has a question for you.
Sorry, Don.
Oh, sorry.
There's something that came up. Excuse me. Prince Philip and the Duchess of Cornwall are coming to Canada, and they are in fact in charge, head of the Anglican Church. Do we want to say anything to them?
I hate to say this, but I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, that's okay. The Prince Philip and the Duchess of Cornwall are coming to Ontario.
Mhm.
They are the head of the Anglican Church. Do we want to say anything to them or have them say anything to us?
Well, that's a good question because I did see that in the paper that they were coming to Canada. And I would not be trying to be disrespectful, but to me, the same thing applies. I mean, I would talk to them if you could encourage the Anglican Church, head of the Anglican Church, I guess they're the head, to hand over those records. I mean, that would be a tremendous positive for, you know, for the residential schools across Canada even. You know, I'm sure we're not the only ones. I mean, I wouldn't mind talking to them as long as they were willing to make some kind of concession to getting us those records as well. Because if the Archbishop came here and if he had agreed to talk to us about those two issues, and the two issues that we actually asked for was to hand over the records and because as a nation, we've lost so much of our language and stuff like that. We wanted them to help fund the Everlasting Tree School, which is a Mohawk, I don't think Mohawk or Cayuga school on the reserve. I mean, because they do need a new building. They need a building to start with. And they do have a lot of success with restoring the native language. And so those are the two things that we asked for. And we had sent a letter as well. And I know that they have that on record, that those are the things that we would like to talk about. If you want to talk to us, come prepared to address those issues.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
Councilor McCreary.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Welcome. That's very interesting. So before us today, we have a resolution asking the province and federal government to release all documents. Would it be helpful if we amend it to include the Anglican Church?
That would be awesome.
Okay.
Yes, that would.
Stay tuned.
Okay. All right, I'm staying tuned.
There'll be a few more questions for you.
Oh
Don.
my, sorry. I'm not trying to get out of the hot
You
seat.
don't have to answer. You don't have to answer questions you don't want to. But Councilor Wall.
I'll ask the question. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. No question.
No, I'll ask. What is something that the average person can do to help? Oh, my mic, yeah. What is something that the average person can do to help with the Survivor Secretariat's cause?
Actually, that's a question that we frequently get, not so much as Survivor Secretariat, but as former residential school students. And I think the biggest thing is that first of all, you can educate yourself about the Survivor Secretariat. We have a website and there's a lot of information on there. I mean, we're not allowed to divulge some information that's confidential, but you'll get a good understanding of who we are and what we're trying to do. And I think the average person to me, they just kind of have to look into that kind of stuff themselves. But I mean, you can always have people request to speak to a survivor and hear their stories, because there's so many stories and so many people who have had different experiences. Like in our group, as it is, we have people, kids from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, all up to 1970. And a lot of us have sometimes very similar stories, but also unique stories. And it'll give everybody a better understanding of life at and we call it the mush hole, because I don't know, maybe 100 years ago they called it that. But to request that and get yourself educated on the lives of some of those children, me included. I mean, it was a very harsh place. And I know that somebody else is going to be addressing some of that. Diane, she's going to be speaking tonight too. She's going to be addressing some of those kind of more pointed eras in the history of the mush hole or the Mohawk Institute. But I would say, get to know somebody, get to know their stories. And if you want, you can request, I know Woodland Cultural Center has a lot of our stories on video, those types of things. And you can also, I've also belonged to the Mohawk Village Memorial Park, which is all residential school survivors or second generation. We're all volunteers, and we're putting in a memorial park right beside the mush hole on the girls' side. It's 5 acres. Our band council gave us permission to develop that as such. And we're just trying to make that a real positive place, a peaceful place for all communities to come, not just for Six Nations, but everybody, anybody who has that same goal in mind, a very positive, peaceful place. And sometimes it can be, if you go into that much hole, into the residential school, and you hear some of those really dark stories, those really negative things, we're hoping that this park will be someplace when you come out, you can sit down and reflect, because a lot of times people just go away. And what did they think about? You know, like hearing all these things, you do need some time to think about it, to deal with it. And this would be a positive place for all people. And that's what we're trying to do. We need money.
I think that's one of the things you wanted to ask me. But thank you very much. Thank you very much, Don. Next, the next person in the speaking order is Geronimo Henry. So Geronimo, if you'd like to come up and. Good evening, Mr. Henry.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, so, well, I'm a survivor at a residential school. Well, first of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to kind of talk to the council, the Brantford Council here tonight. So I never met any of you guys or something, but I was just telling the mayor and that I knew Chris Field, you know, and we used to have some great talks over at the Gleblands, I guess. I talked to somebody, they didn't know where that was. So it's by the Mohawk Park. So, yeah, so what I'm here tonight to ask the council is, you know, like to give your consideration about passing this motion to make it legal. Is it legal now or not? Or
Yeah, what we'll do, Mr. Henry, is once we've heard from the 4 persons who want to speak, we'll then debate it and decide whether or not to pass it.
yeah, that's what I thought. Like the way I was talking to some guy said, well, we already opened our books up and stuff like that, but not that I know of. So that's why we're here tonight, you know, to ask you for like a yes vote on this motion that's coming up, you know. So, and the way I talked to some of the other councillors, they more or less could like set an example for other cities to do the same thing, So it'd be kind of like their contribution of helping out. I know the gentleman over here wanted to know, what can we do to help, you know? So that would be one way, you know, so we got to kind of like all get together and, you know, and kind of like bring this reconciliation to a complete. And we can't do that unless we get the truth comes out right across Canada, you know, especially here around Brantford area and at the Mohawk Institute. So that's what I'm here for, just to ask your consideration for a yes vote, you know. So then maybe we could pass it on, like I said, you know, to other cities and talk to them and ask them to do the same thing, you know. So, but what I'm here tonight is kind of like to tell you a few things that kind of had questions in my mind about, like how Brantford kind of like Don says, we were kind of like neighbors all down through the years, you know. And that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, is kind of like the interactions we had with like the city of Brantford. And I was talking to one of the councillors there, like I remember when I was there, like it would either be the Salvation Army or the Rotary Club at Christmas time, like say a couple of days before Christmas, maybe on the 21st or 22nd. One of those organizations would come to the Mohawk School and come down to the dining hall, and every boy and girl would get a present and maybe a little bag of hard Christmas candy and an orange in there. So, and I don't know, like I was asking one of the guys if that had to be passed through council or not, but that might have been just an individual business, you know, to do that just for charity, or maybe kind of like a write-off, I guess. You know, so, and then the other thing, like that was one thing. So they'd always come there, and eventually I guess it faded out, because I left there. I went there in 42. I was 6 years old, and left in 53, and I was 17. So, and it kind of faded out as years went by, I guess. But I remember that the Salvation Army, or the, you know, like the Rotary Club or somebody would come there and give each boy and girl a present. And so that kind of made us happy, you know, and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's kind of like, I'm a traditional person. I'm not like, I don't go to church like, you know, like my mother and father, they went to the Longhouse and believed in who they were, like as Native people. You know, we got our own language, we got our own, you know, culture, and we have our own constitution and stuff like that. So it was pretty hard for me to adjust to this European way of learning, like, you know, to assimilate me into this European way of life. So it still bothers me today about what they put me through. They took my language and my culture and my own way of believing. So, and that still affects me today, of like what they did to me. And a lot of the other traditional people that went there, I imagine they're feeling the same way, you know. And so the other thing, like I was going to mention, was that at Christmas time, again, like around the 21st or the 22nd, you know, like this, there used to be this hotel downtown. It was called the Kirby House. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember that. The Kirby House there is about where, on Colbert Street, near Clarence Street. So Mr. Kirby would invite all the Native boys and girls from that residential school to come up to his hotel and give us actually like a Christmas dinner, like, you know, with turkey and the gravy and the cranberries and you know, like the dinner roll and all this stuff, you know. And I was telling somebody about that, you know, and about the cranberries, because back in them days, they didn't have them all crushed up like you can now. It's in like a jelly, you know. So like, because we didn't get to, you know, eat too good at the school, because we were always hungry. So when they come to the cranberries, start chewing on that. Like, and we was wondering, like, we just kind of spit it out, like, you know, like just throw it under the table. Like, you know, because we were so used to like foreign food, I guess you could say. but he did that, like, I guess, like, so I thought I'd mention that to, to make Brantford like a little better place, I guess, for helping out, like even with the Salvation Army or Rotary Club, they're all part of the Brantford, and so Mr. Kirby would donate this dinner, a turkey dinner for us. And we'd all have to get on in our Sunday clothes and march uptown and be there by 7 o'clock and be home by 8:30 or something, 9 o'clock. But we'd have to march. We'd have to walk up there, 2x2s up to the Kirby house. And on the way through, like some of the white boys around there would start teasing us and stuff like that, calling us dirty Indians and, come out and, saying all kinds of racist stuff at us. And a few times we just kind of like broke the line, and we'd have a big fight with them guys, so just to say like we're tough too, like or something. But I think we were tougher than them because nobody in Canada, is kind of went through stuff like that. Us kids, I went through the residential school, I compare that with the atrocities and all the trauma we went through. Like we were supposed to have like this post-traumatic stress, like the Army guys get. All those kids got that in some way, and it affects them a lot in other kids more than and less than other kids. But it seems like the Europeans finally, figured it out. They're done studies on Native kids, I guess, and that's what we got, post-traumatic stress. So that's that was another thing that like I would mention that just to make Brantford look good again, like part of your community that had interactions with the school. And then I remember us going to the shows in Brantford. And I remember at that time there was three show theaters. There was the Odeon on Market Street, and there was the Capitol on which is the Sanderson Center now, I think. And then down by Clarence Street on Coburn Street, they had the college. And the other two, like it cost 12 cents when I was at the school. It cost 12 cents to go into the Odeon and the Capitol. But over at the college theater, it was only 6 cents. So, and that's where us kids would go, like on a Saturday afternoon. And it was kind of like basically, I think, part of the assimilation. Maybe the owner of the show didn't see it that way, but it was always, I think, when we went, we always seen these cowboys and Indian shows, and the Indians always lost. So it was kind of a form of like assimilation thing. Like we didn't know it, like we just, so if you see that, if you see the cowboys and Indian shows and the Indians lose, and then you get to thinking, well, I'm no good because the Indians, the only good Indian is a dead Indian, So I think that's what it was, like in my mind, it was kind of part of us being assimilated. So if we're Indian, well, we want to be like the cowboys, like the European cowboys, or that was the whole thing of everything. And then we'd see like a cartoon and the world news. I think that was it. And it was like that on all the shows, I guess, they showed. But they had better movies at the other two, like the Odeon Capitol. We had like the low budget ones over at our college. Yeah, so I thought I'd mention those, like being good neighbors, and they try to help us, and stuff like that. And sometimes, like when I was there in the wintertime, we'd make our own ice rink there in the orchard. And sometimes, again, here we go again, like it's either the Salvation Army, the Rotary Club, or one of those organizations, they'd bring down like a lot of used skates and hockey sticks and sometimes some hockey pads, and they just donate them to help the Indians out, like, So that was a lot of good gestures from the city of Brantford, like to kind of help help us out at the school, like, because they couldn't afford to buy any hockey equipment like that when I was there. So like, yeah, and that's kind of like the stuff like I was going to talk about, and let me see what else. Like, so I think like just to ask your wake up for this vote tonight, like, and like we said, like if you have the the yes vote and spread it out to other cities around the area, you know, and I think that would be their way of kind of like helping to complete like this reconciliation thing that we're all after. And reconciliation to me means like you know, reconcile with all the wrongs that they did in the past, you know, and so and that would the gentleman over here was saying, well, what can we do or what can people do? You know, well, that's what you can do to make it right. You know, tell the truth or something like that. If you know something that happened at the school, come up to the school or tell somebody, or one of the us on the board, or even Kim Murray. She's kind of like the secretary, the boss, I guess you could say. You know, yeah, and so that would help us to reach this reconciliation that we're all after. And we can't even start to heal, like I figure, like until the whole truth is, all the truth comes out about the school, you know. And I think like what we're doing, we're going to have at the school actually too. It's like we're going to have the history of the residential school. So all this information that we're gathering either from Brantford or other cities, like pertaining to the residential school, so it would help, you know, with the history of the residential school. And there'll be archives there and stuff like that. All the kids' names and things like that will be there. Plus things that happen from different cities, or like Brantford. Well, look at there. I mentioned 4 things, good things that Brantford did, you know, to help out the kids at the residential school. So, and actually, like I went down to see the primate, the Anglican primate, when he was in Toronto. I think it was May the 2nd. So Barry Hill asked me if I wanted to go down. He kind of looks after the Mohawk Chapel. So we didn't want him there to come down there. And some of the, in our meetings, suggested that, well, that was my suggestion. If he wants to come, he can come to the residential school. And if survivors want to come up and talk to him, you know, and if there were going to be a service later on over at the church, it was up to you whether you wanted to go or not. Because a lot of them, us survivors, are still hurting, you know, and all this European counseling, like, just don't cut it for me. Like, I still suffer from that, you know, like, and I'm like 86 now, about 65 years ago or something, and I still, you know, if I smell something that, you know, a certain smell, I'm right away, my mind's right back at the school. You know, if I see somebody crying or getting beat up or something like that, or, you know, and my mind goes right back to the school. So I don't know whether that's part of that, you know, that all the trauma that we suffered at the school. So, yeah. And so like, I thought about it for a while when Barry asked me to go to Toronto. And it just seemed like, I guess maybe that's the way it was, because he wanted to go down there and talk to the primate, the Anglican primate, on the Monday, and I couldn't go down there because I had a doctor's appointment, and he was out west at that time, and so it just happened like his plane couldn't make it to Toronto on Monday, so he came on Tuesday. So, and then Barry called me up again and asked me if I wanted to go, and I thought, well, I'm not doing nothing now, so. Other than I just kind of missed the meeting, like we're supposed to have our own survivor secretariat meeting. So I went down there and I talked to him and told my story, you know, about 20 minutes of what happened to me at the school. So, but my main reason was kind of like not only for me, but for other survivors who can't even talk about the residential school yet, because they're still traumatized. So I'm kind of talking for them too. And all the ones that passed away that didn't see justice, you know, or didn't hear this apology. It was things like that bothers me, you know. And my goal, I think, in life is, like the rest of my life, is to try and get justice for all the kids that went to the residential schools. Like I said, that never heard the apology, and you know, and especially like when Harper made this, you know, the apology, and in the government buildings, stuff like that in Ottawa, you know. And well, somebody gave me a copy of that, you know, and the article was about that, like that big. The paper was about like that size. So somebody gave me that, and I read it over, and I thought, like, well, I don't accept the apology. And I go to different schools. I've been to like a lot of the universities and colleges and telling my story. And like I was telling the gentleman, I think I talked at BCI, I take that Pauline Johnson High School and public schools around here. And, you know, I talked to mostly like Western, Laurier, Guelph University, and stuff like that, you know, and to tell my story, to get the word out. That's what my goal in life is, to tell like the non-natives or the, you know, what happened at these schools. Because it seemed like the government, the churches had this residential schools hidden in history all the time. Because on weekends, I used to go up there and spend my own time on the weekends after they found the 215 unmarked graves out in BC. So I thought I just took it on myself, and I just volunteered to go up there and talk to anybody that came up to the school to, you know, bring flowers or teddy bears for the kids for the unmarked graves, you know, the 215 unmarked graves. And they'd come up there, mostly non-natives. I was talking to one guy, one of the counselors there at lunch here. And I said, it was mostly like non-native people would come up there. But it all started like, you know, like when it first happened, and Robbie called me up, and we all went up there, and it all started out, we put moccasins on the steps, you know. But after that, and then just like ordinary, just like non-natives start coming up, and they felt for these native kids in these unmarked graves, and they'd even come up there, and some of them would cry. Like that's what really surprised me, like, you know, for non-natives to come up, you know, compared to what we went through at the school. We were just like, you know, in the day called savages, pagans, and, you know, no good Indians. The only good Indian is a dead Indian, stuff like that. You know, that was kind of like their attitude. And it was only till about the 70s or 80s it started to change really slow. Once everybody started knowing their rights, you know, what their rights were and stuff like that. And it started to change. And we had like a lot more non-natives seeing our side, our view of, you know, of native, the way we live and stuff like that. So, and so on the weekends, I would go up there and just talk to them. I'd introduce myself, you know, how many years I was at the school. And I said, if there's any questions you want me to answer, I think I can. I got 11 years experience in the school here. So I think I can just about answer any questions you got about the school. So, and some of them would come up there, they'd be actually angry because they never heard about the residential school, not even in the education system, not even part of history. You know, that was a sad part. So the federal government and the churches, I guess you could say, did a good job to keep it a secret. You know, all these years, it wasn't even in the school curriculum or anything about, you know, about residential schools. If there was, it was like a one-liner, like, you know, and it wasn't until like, you know, probably like maybe say in the 70s or 80s, and as we got up to 2022, and now people are doing their thesis on a residential school. I've done interviews with people that, you know, that's what their thesis was, to graduate from university or college, and they do it on like a residential school, you know, and so, and that's what. And that's what it was kind of like all about, like about going up there, just volunteering my time, you know, and going up there talking. And there again, like it was just, you know, to get the word out, to tell people what it was like there, like the non-native people, because they never even heard of residential schools, you know, especially the ones who were like in their 30s or 40s or older, you know, and they'd be up there and they'd come up there, and once they, you know, the guy would stomp his feet right on the ground and say, well, how come I didn't, hear about this and learn about this in school? You know, so they were angry up there, and some of them would cry up there. And actually there was a family, looked like two families, about 10 people from Quebec, came all the way from Quebec to see this residential school. So when they got there, and I went over there and introduced myself, and they just all gathered around me, and they said, "Oh yeah, well, you're a survivor of the school." I said, "Yeah. And we're Catholics, and we're so sorry this happened to you." And they actually want me to forgive them. They were crying there, want me to forgive them. That's how bad they felt, about what us Native kids went through the schools. But I told them, like, I had no authority to. I'm not a minister or anybody. I got no authority to, to forgive anybody. I said, that's why you got the Pope. He'll forgive you. But just to get back to the Archdeacon, like when we went down to Toronto to talk to him, and he came over and shook my hand, and he says, "Well, Geronimo," he says, "I only have like 4 years left as the head of the Archdeacon position." He says, and he says, "I'm going to do my best to reconcile these issues about residential school." He says that's all I can do, but I got 4 years to do it. And somebody else is going to sit in his seat. So that was the only promises that he made. Really true politician, I would say. But that's all we got from him. He didn't make no commitments. I guess he knows the law and stuff like that, so he wouldn't, shoot himself in the foot, sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, Geronimo, I'm hoping we're going to make a commitment tonight to help the survivors group. And I want to thank you very much for the interesting conversation we had before the meeting.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for coming tonight and telling us what it was like for you and the impact that it had upon you, and some of the interesting memories, brought back some memories of my own about Brantford. And want to thank you very much.
Yeah. Are there any questions? You guys want to shoot me down or what?
We're not
11
interested.
years, so no questions. So yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, Diane Hill.
Mayor, while they're getting set up, I have to apologize. I have a prior commitment that I made before this meeting was set, and I'll have to leave.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Martin. I should also mention to the viewers, I spoke to Councillor Utley, and he's not here tonight because he's not feeling very well. So, Diane.
My English name is Diane Hill. I give greetings and respect to all our families. I am of the Turtle Clan Mohawk Nation. I am from Ashwaubenon, and I live at the place of the fire. Chidolonta, you wego on in a kakwasua, dehno, nidu, yaw, aguego, no hot squawe, songoya diso, de songwawe. First, the food, the sustenance that sustains us. And I want to thank you for sharing that. It sustains each of us. So first, I acknowledge the food and everything that the Creator has provided for us. I'm happy to notice that everyone, almost everyone, except one, I'm happy to notice everyone that is here has peacefully arrived. You've made it on your journey. And so I acknowledge that you've gotten here. There's a reason for things to happen, and we are here together. I anticipate we are all here with a common purpose: to uncover a truth. Where are the unmarked graves of the children of the Mohawk Residential School? Every single residential school, it is a documented fact, had a cemetery. We need to find that. We haven't yet. The truth is at times ugly, extremely ugly. In fact, it's hideous. Wahitko, soji wahitko. Dano, got no way. Ladik sa ongoa. It's an ugly truth. But where are our children? In order to uncover this truth, we need to work together. Improve our relationship of peace, friendship, and respect. And we know that from the Turo. You've heard Don, Geronimo. We're neighbors. We're more than that. We are related. We were all put here to help each other. At this time, I compliment the city of Brantford, all of you, in the pursuit of the truth. You are leading by action. By action. You are setting the precedent, showing other cities, municipalities, it can be done. Takes a little time, but it can be done to help someone. Through the release and sharing of this with the Survivor Secretariat, the LIDAR results, the mapping, the pertinent records to date. I want to say Nyawagoa. Agwaliasago. I thank you greatly. That comes from within my heart. Now I'm going to take you on a little walk back to the early 1900s. Federal records indicate thousands died. Children, students died as a result of tuberculosis. As many as half the roll call in the early 1900s. We also know that there was an experiment within the residential schools regarding the Indigenous children and tuberculosis. That's a proven, documented fact. It's hideous, it's ugly. Also documented deaths is the Spanish flu, which took many young Indigenous lives. 1922, Dr. P.H. Bryce, Chief Medical Officer, Department of Indian Affairs, recorded the story of a national crime. It's not a story. Story made it nice. It's not nice, it's a truth. And again, hideous. So he documented 75% were dead at the end of the 16 years since the school opened. Dr. Bryce continues, documents estimated 50% or more of the 100,000 to 150,000 who entered these schools never returned home alive. Tonight, hug your children. Hug your grandchildren. Hug your nieces, hug your nephews. Hug your foster children. The neighbors' children come over. Give them a hug. They're precious. The Delegation, June 2nd, 2010 continues. Dr. Bryce also stated, these numbers include the Mohawk Residential School in Brantford. Let's go up to 1998. The federal government admitted rampant physical and sexual abuse of Indigenous children. Many suffering years of abuse. I said, this is the truth. And remember, it's hideous. 2008, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper issued an apology for the harms that were committed at the residential schools. 2013, Colin Perkle wrote, Alex Mass of the Missing Children Project stated at least 3,000 children have a documented death, when it occurred and the circumstances. Let's enter into 2014. According to the Brant County Branch, Ontario Genealogical Society 1964, of the students attending the Mohawk Residential School in Brantford, there are graves of 8 children. Got no way. Where are the children? Wendy Fletcher, through interviews with staff, reported fights among the students on the boys' side. The young boys were forced to fight each other for the enjoyment of the staff. Yes, this is ugly. Yes, this is hideous. The loser of the fight, the 2 boys that were selected by the staff member, the loser would be the one to clean up the blood off the walls, off the floor. And then if it occurred in the hallway, what they all knew was the hallway of blood, they would also have to clean the ceiling. 8 years old, 10 years old. Think of your family members. Do you have anyone close to that age? Let me restate. The truth is hideous. It's pitiful. Sojiwahitko. Dehno yodadidola. It's beyond pitiful. Presently, there appears to be over 7,000 unmarked graves located. I encourage you to enhance our relationship through the release of the records, as stated by the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I ask, where are the unmarked graves of the children? To date, for the Mohawk Residential School in Brantford, there are 38 identified territories where the children were admitted from. Yes, there have been apologies. 3 times from the Anglican Church. I watched the most recent one, Archbishop Canterbury. He said it was a mystery. When the survivors told him of the abuse, he said it was a mystery. He had no idea. They have the records. The Catholic Church apologized. Canada's Prime Minister apologized. But we need action. No words of apology will drown out the screams of a mother as her children are being ripped from her life. No words of anyone's apology. We need records. Where are the children? This is the truth. Still hideous, still pitiful, and still very ugly. All Indigenous children from all residential schools across Canada need to be properly put at peace so they can continue their journey home. If not physically, then spiritually. Which brings me to another word that is hideous: greed. This disease needs to be eradicated. The doctrine of discovery is based on greed for land and power. But at what cost? I'll tell you the cost. The Indigenous children, their families, their identity, our identity, based on culture, traditions, and our language. In closing, I encourage each and every one of you to improve the fragile relationship that has developed. Release the records nationally, from churches, from hospitals, from the welfare system, everywhere. 38 territories had children kidnapped from their homes. Mothers, fathers, grandparents were held back, threatened with jail. Why? Because of that hideous word, greed, that disease of greed. So at this time, I want to say Nyawa for setting the precedent and leading the way with action of requesting records. And I'm going to say it in advance. I hope your debate goes well tonight. I hope it becomes positive. And I would really, really, really anticipate to see the City Council become the historic part of Canada's legacy of truth, as ugly as it is and as hideous as it is. Lead the way. Lead the way. You have one chance. We are willing to work together. You have already demonstrated that. Locate the unmarked graves of all Indigenous children. Eto, nanda wala kwene, dano eto, negawonage, dano eto. I have done my best. And these are the words I give you. That's all, Yawa. Until it went stay. Ask your questions. Are there questions?
Any members have any questions? I want to say this, Diane. What you had to tell us was very moving. I've heard a lot of speakers from this chair over the last 3.5 years. I've never heard anybody speak in a way from the soul to the soul. Very moving. And I hope the debate tonight proceeds as you hope it will. And I hope it will too.
Yawa.
Thank you.
I have a lot of haunting memories from that school. And with our deceased children, I can only imagine what they endured is not. It doesn't happen in the world of humans, what they endured. their experiments, the starvation, the abuse. Questions?
Don't see any questions, Diane. Thank you.
Yama.
Yes, and our fourth speaker, Scott Robertson.
I never take anything sitting down. Sego, I'd like to acknowledge the elders in the room, the survivors, Diane, Geronimo, and Dawn for your courage. I'd like to recognize the community members of Six Nations who cannot be here. Mayor Davis, fellow councillors, staff of the city of Brantford, including Heidi DeVries and Lucas Isaacs, for opening up their hearts and facilitating tonight. I'd like to thank all of you for your courage and commitment for attending tonight's historical proceedings. My name is Scott Robertson. I'm a lawyer working with the firm of Malgalva Corbier. It is both a privilege and an honor to represent the Survivors Secretariat in addressing these important issues before you. As someone who walks in both communities, my mother being a hill from Six Nations, my father growing up on Sherwood Avenue in West Brant, I have shared experiences and knowledge which guide me in these discussions. The Survivors Secretariat calls upon this council to consider the within motion, which requests the immediate release of all documents in the possession of the Government of Canada and Ontario related to the former Mohawk Institute Residential School. In bringing forward this motion, the Survivors Secretariat directs your attention to the findings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, specifically those calls to actions directed at municipalities and the pivotal role they play in facilitating reconciliation. The survivors that appeared before you tonight gave you the why. I'm going to give you the how. The TRC was initiated out of Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, which the largest class action settlement in Canadian history. And one of the elements of the agreement was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada to facilitate reconciliation amongst former students, their families, their communities, and all Canadians. Not a small task. The TRC, chaired by the Honourable Murray Sinclair, spent 6 years traveling to all parts of Canada and heard from more than 6,500 witnesses. The TRC also hosted 7 national events across Canada to engage the Canadian public, educate people about the tragic history and the legacy of residential school systems, and to share and honor the experiences of former students and their families. On June 1st, 2015, the day before the TRC released its summary report and calls to action, a Cree member of Parliament, Romeo Shaganash, who is also a survivor, spoke in the House of Commons about the importance of seizing the moment to act on reconciliation. I would like to borrow, if I may, Romeo's inspiring words. These are his words. After the report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People almost 20 years ago, our common history will provide us with yet another moment to restore harmony among the peoples of this land that we now call Canada. Tomorrow is that moment. Let us pause for a moment tomorrow and reflect on the way forward. History will give us yet another occasion. Canadians want change. Canadians want us to seize the moment. Change and reconciliation go together. This is Romeo's words. As a survivor, I can appreciate the fundamental importance of the moment we are about to experience tomorrow. Let us all collectively seize it and collectively commit to genuine change in our relationships with the first peoples of this country. Let us set out to do what 148 years of successive governments have not managed to achieve, and that is reconciliation. Reconciliation is about healing relationships, building trust, working out differences. It's about redress and respect for the rights of all. Reconciliation means a meaningful commitment to change, to honesty, and engaging conceptualization relationships to create a future of peace, a future of justice, and a future of renewed hope for all of us. I suggest that it is not possible to conceive a reconciliation in the absence of justice. Many segments of Canadian society have been honestly willing to engage in a dialogue to obtain truth, dignity, and above all, reconciliation. The adoption of the TRC report, important as it is, would not in itself change the everyday lives of women, men, and children whose experience it honors and gives witness to. No. For this, we need the political and constitutional commitment of not only the governments, but the support and goodwill of the public, of all Canadians, to create and implement substantial and meaningful changes in cooperation, in partnership with Indigenous peoples themselves. We are all in this together. Those words spoken in 2015 also apply to today, and they apply to you. The motion before you represents reconciliation in action and provides a much-needed voice to the survivors. It is but a small step compared to the sacrifices of those survivors who appear before you. They share their stories not just to ease their burden, but to make things better for their children and grandchildren. Their collective perseverance and resilience are unparalleled and infectious. It is Brantford's obligation to address these historical wrongs in a meaningful and respectful way. The TRC final report provided 94 calls to action to further reconciliation between Canadians and their survivors, 13 of which are directed at municipalities. I urge this council to fully implement call to action number 75, which requires the federal government to work with provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, churches, Aboriginal communities, former residential school students, and current landowners to develop and implement strategies and procedures for the ongoing identification, documentation, maintenance, commemoration, and protection of residential school cemeteries and other sites at which residential school children were buried. This is to include the provisions of appropriate memorial ceremonies and commemorative markers to honor the deceased children. When Mayor Davis was considering running again for office, despite his recent health concerns, he was quoted as saying, "I know that I'm never happy if a job isn't finished and we're making headway." We would like to hold him to his word as we begin this journey towards reconciliation and hope that he finishes the job of assisting the survivors in their struggle to obtain the truth and move forward. I wish to thank those counselors who are here this evening for your time and efforts, and more importantly, for opening your hearts and your minds to implementing those powers available to you to assist your neighbors and facilitate a long overdue dialogue. True reconciliation goes beyond the scope of the TRC recommendations and requires meaningful engagement strategies. It is the aspiration of all involved that today marks the first step in this long journey to recovery. Nyewa. I would also like to answer some of the questions that have been posed that may not have received an answer, if I may.
Yes,
So,
go ahead, Scott.
with respect to what can individuals do? Well, first of all, they can donate to the website, survivorsecretariat.ca. That would be important. Funding is going to be extremely important moving forward. There's an online tour on that same website of the mush hole, and I would encourage anyone to take a view of that and understand and educate yourself. Education is extremely important. With respect to records and what has been provided, currently we are negotiating a research agreement with the province of Ontario. We may have to see it a court order. The government will provide those public documents that are in archives, but there are protected documents that are at issue. And it's those protected documents that we're going to need your help and your motion in which to proceed in requesting and obtaining those documents. And it's important to understand that the province inspected those schools during their operation. Those records exist, and those are the records we're after. Again, the feds also provide public records to archives and whatnot, and there's many of those documents that are housed at the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, but there are other documents. And again, those are the documents we require your assistance, and your motion will be most persuasive in putting that forward. With respect to the New England company in London, that's the organization that ran the school here in Brantford, right? Those documents are in London. They also have a chapter in the United States, and we're going to be trying to pursue those documents as well. It's also important to know that the Six Nations children are not only sent to the mush hole. There are children that were sent to Spanish near Manitoulin Island, Shingwakonk School in Sault Ste. Marie, and Mount Elgin in Muncie. So that's why your motion is important, because it'll be used to persuade other municipalities to do the same. And those students that were from Six Nations that got sent to those organizations, and those institutions will benefit from that. So I think those answers any of the questions. Are there any further questions?
Yes, Scott, I have a couple questions. So the Ontario government, on what basis were they protecting records?
So that's what the court order will get to the heart of.
Okay. And you've seen the resolution that I believe you worked on with Councillor Wall. Given the discussion, is there anything else that you think we should add into it? I mean, it's primarily directed at the Ontario and federal governments. Should we consider adding in the company you just mentioned or the Anglican Church?
I mean, I find the motion persuasive for what it is intended to do, right? You are calling upon those governments being a creature of statute, municipalities being a creature of statute of the provincial government. I think that's very persuasive. I think what you're doing tonight is going to take a first step. Other municipalities will follow, right? You are creating a history tonight. So when people look back and say, what did the city of Brantford do when they had this knowledge, when they knew they could make a difference, when they had the power? And I think you, in your opening tonight, you said something about wielding your power in a good way in your opening. And I think that's what we're calling upon you to do, is to wield that power. So I would stay within the motion itself. The churches are another issue, but in terms of being persuasive for the municipality itself, asking the provincial government and the federal government, that's going to put a lot of pressure on them, helpful pressure.
We've got some other questions. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, and I'm glad you're here to answer some questions. I had some for Dawn earlier when she asked about they need money. I believe that the provincial government's fixed in at $1.3 million, and you were suggesting, or it's been suggested that $9 million is needed. Is this the place, do you think, for us to put support in towards $9 million in your endeavors to help locate the children after you get the records?
Absolutely. I think anything that the city of Brantford can do to contribute. This is a collective responsibility. This does not fall on the church by itself. It doesn't fall on the Canadian or the provincial government or the city of Brantford by itself. This falls upon all of us. I often speak to groups of lawyers, and unfortunately, I bring bad news when I come to speak to them, because I call ourselves agents of harm. For many years in this country, the lawyers responsible for upholding that law stood by and did nothing. And so this is what we're trying to prevent, both from a government, from organizations, from structures of institutions themselves. We need to turn things on their head. So if there is any way that Brantford can find itself to make a contribution beyond, and I mean, it's already been stated that Brantford as a willing partner has already donated an enormous amount of time, energy, and resources at their disposal to assist. And they've been very kind and open about what else can we do. But money helps, right? This is the initial stage. We're just in discovery stage. We have a long-term goal. We have a board set up. We have a structure in which we're going to be dealing with locating, but with locating is going to cause a whole bunch of other issues. There's a memorial section that we have to deal with. There's ceremonial purposes. There's what do we do when we locate? Well, we always have to bring them back into the community, and what are we going to do with that information and knowledge? So this isn't just about locating and putting a button on it and saying we're done. This is what reconciliation is. This is the ugliness that we talked about. This is dealing with that ugliness and moving forward. So it's 9 million. Who knows, right? I mean, those are just estimates as to what this is going to cost. We don't know. It is an expensive endeavor, running LiDARs, having people operate them and train them. It's an expensive endeavor.
I appreciate that. And is there contributions towards that portion of it from the federal government?
Yes, the government has allocated funding. The provincial government has allocated funding, on unlimited.
But it is short, is it not?
Yes, it's on the provincial government, for instance, is a 3-year working term.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Curry, did you have your hand up?
Welcome. Thanks for coming today. I want to come back to what you talked about with respect to protected documents. So you've FOI'd province of Ontario and they've refused to release?
We haven't refused to release so far. We're working on an agreement in principle with respect to research, allowing our researchers to go into their archives and documents to be able to access documents that may have been protected under some other form of legislation, because not all of those documents have been researched. And the word relevancy always seems to rear its ugly head. And who determines what's relevant? I think what's really important to understand here, from a position of power, think about how the survivors feel. They're put into a system where legislation creates a residential school system. They have no control. They're arrested for trying to withhold their children from going into residential school. They have no control over how they're operated or who controls them and how complaints are dealt with. Then we go through all those painful processes, and now here we are on the tail end of that, and we're still being doctored into believing that the government has some form of control over this very information that is the essence of residential schools. And it's the ugly that we talked about. That's the ugliness that we want to see. If we're going to get to the truth, and before we can get to reconciliation, we need to know what that truth is. We need to know what those documents are. And by having any resistance to that makes no sense, and it's going to prevent reconciliation.
Do you know of any plan to welcome residents of Brantford back into the school for in-person tours?
Could you repeat that, sorry?
Perhaps not verbatim, but I could have a go at it. Do you know if there's a plan to welcome residents of Brantford back into the school for in-person touring?
Well, they're purposely redoing the school right now as it's going to be a living memorial. So anybody would be able to access that.
Tomorrow?
I don't know if it's tomorrow.
That was the crux of my question.
But it'll be a journey, just like reconciliation.
So that's a no.
But
Okay.
the long-term goal is yes, it will be an open site for people to come and visit. It'll be used as an educational tool for the purposes of showing and interpreting through the eyes of people from the community.
So that's a yes.
That is a yes.
So it's a no, then a yes.
It's a no today, yes tomorrow.
Tomorrow being May.
I don't know the schedule as to when the door will open, but it's not forever closed for sure.
It's always enjoyable having a lawyer in the delegates table and across the
You
way.
can't get a yes, can't get a no.
You talked about the New England company.
Yeah.
What the heck is that?
So that was the company that actually ran the school. And so even though it was under the Anglican umbrella,
Yeah.
it's called the New England Company. And a lot of those records that were taken away are housed now in London, England.
So the New England company
New England Company,
is based in England.
the London chapter, yes. And there's an American chapter as well.
So it's an England company called the New England Company.
Not so new.
Do they still exist?
Yes,
Really? Okay. They
Yeah.
related to the Hudson Bay Company?
no relation.
They seem to have had the same kind of mandate.
Well, I can't speak to that.
You are a lawyer.
I would encourage you to read the book, The Company. It was all about HBC. It's a very interesting book.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This sounds like the first step of a journey that we can travel together. And it also sounds from our earlier conversation with your travels across the country that other communities could emulate our first and second and third steps on this journey as allies. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would fully agree with that statement. And I think you're going to get phone calls. The city of Brantford will get phone calls. People are looking. And again, every community is different, right? The communities will approach this in different ways on their own terms through their own voices. But at least what's happening here today in Brantford is you're creating a template, which people can take best practices from. And so the lessons learned here, whether they be painful or not so painful, will be used for other communities which will benefit from that. Other communities are still grappling with even taking in the information that they're getting. These survivors that appear before you have incredible strength, and the fact that they can rally together and put a foot in front of each other every day and get up and take on this challenge is incredible. And they should be absolutely applauded and exalted for their efforts. But not every community is there yet. They're not in that right space. And so anything you can do and we can do together will create that roadmap at least. And if they choose to follow that roadmap, at least they'll have a way to get there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Scott. I wanted to again thank the delegates presenters who came tonight, had the courage and made the time to come here tonight to tell us your story. I'm sure it'll be invaluable in how we now deal with the resolution that's about to go on the floor. So with that, I will go to Councillor Wall. I believe you have a resolution.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Jan Vanderstout, release of all federal and provincial documents related to the formal Mohawk Institute Residential School. Whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Final Report 2015 confirmed that residential schools were part of a coherent policy implemented by the federal government to eliminate Indigenous people as distinct peoples and to assimilate them into Christian society against their will. And whereas the Deputy Minister of Indian Affairs, Duncan Campbell-Spott, outlined the goals of that policy in 1920 when he told a parliamentary committee that our object is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic. And whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Final Report 2015 also confirmed that despite the coercive measures that the government adopted, it failed to achieve its policy goals. Although Indigenous peoples and cultures have been badly damaged, they continue to exist. And whereas the former Mohawk Institute Residential School operated from 1831 to 1970 within the boundaries of what is now the city of Brantford, and whereas survivors have released statements of missing, murdered, and buried students, and whereas to date, the unmarked burials of over 7,000 missing Indigenous children have been discovered nationwide, and whereas following the May 2021 announcement by Tecumseh Tisquequac First Nation of locating 215 potential burials of children in unmarked graves at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia, the survivors of the Mohawk Institute, along with their families and community members, called on the federal and provincial governments to support the search for remains of missing children who may have been buried on the Mohawk Institute's grounds and surrounding area. And whereas, as of November 2021, a search led by the Survivor Secretariat of the Mohawk Institute Residential School grounds and over 200 hectares of the land associated with the school began. And whereas survivors of the Mohawk Institute Residential School are demanding the release of all federal and provincial documents related to the Mohawk Institute Residential School. And whereas staff of the city of Brantford are currently undertaking a search of city records and archives for any documents, maps, or other relevant information related to the operation of the Mohawk Institute Residential School in order to release this information to the Survivor Secretariat to aid in the search for truth, justice, and healing. And whereas this council is committed to working to advance reconciliation and renewed relationships with First Nations, and whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada issued 94 calls to action, 13 of which are directed at municipal governments. Now, therefore, be it resolved. A, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford respectfully requests the immediate release to the Survivor Secretariat of all documents in possession of the Government of Canada or the Government of Ontario related to the former Mohawk Institute Residential School, now located on 6 nations of the Grand River Territory within the geographical boundaries of the City of Brantford. And B, that the clerk be directed to send a copy of this resolution to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Premier Doug Ford, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services Patty Haju, Minister of Indigenous Affairs Greg Rickford, MPP Will Boma, MP Larry Brock, Mayor David Bailey, Chief Mark Hill, Chief Stacey Laforme, and the Survivor Secretariat. And C, that the clerk be directed to send a copy of this resolution to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Association of Municipalities Ontario for circulation to all municipalities in Ontario with an invitation to adopt a similar resolution, and specifically to those located within the Haldimand Tract, including Haldimand County, the County of Brant, the City of Brantford, the City of Kitchener, the City of Waterloo, and the region of Waterloo. And if I can read a statement, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead as the mover.
Thank you. My family has just welcomed our first daughter into this world. And I remember her sitting on my lap as I read a newspaper article where the Survivor Secretariat demanded that the provincial and federal governments release the records for their investigation. And I couldn't imagine somebody taking her away and not knowing what happened and knowing that that information could be out there somewhere. We are put into this position of authority and privilege, and together we can use that to help. My wife and I immediately began drafting the words of this resolution, requesting the release of any information that the city may have, and requesting that the provincial and federal governments do the same. I then reached out to our staff and was relieved to find out that the City of Brantford had already begun working with the Survivor Secretariat, and that our incredible team had been inspired and moved to prioritize and insist in any way possible to share any information that may prove helpful. My council colleagues assisted even further, helping fine-tune the wording and suggesting means by which this motion could be expanded beyond our council chambers. And all of this propelled the motion further. If we can do it, others can too. Reflecting on nothing about us without us, we immediately began consultation with the Survivor Secretariat, ensuring that this motion was respectful, constructive, and used appropriate wording. We also wanted to ensure that this motion would be something that would be welcome and helpful to their efforts. These consultations culminated in the motion we've just tabled. The survivors and the families of those that never came home deserve to know these records must be released.
Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone who has presented this evening and all of the supporters who have come as well. And I really want to thank Councillors Wall and Vanderstel for making another step forward, maybe one of the most significant. Sitting at a table and breaking bread together and learning each other's names and just talking about normal daily stuff should be really simple, right? Today was a first. So I am so grateful for that. I'm grateful for the steps forward. Lucas, thank you for helping guide us through this. This is unbelievably, incredibly important. Timing is everything. Clause C talks about circulating this through FCM. As the representative of the City of Brantford at FCM, and I sit on their board, I will be in Regina June 1st to 6th. And I will find out how to make this more than an invitation and make this more than just a circulation, and use the clout that FCM has been very successful in wielding in the past few years with the federal government. I think that this is certainly an issue and an item that we can all embrace. And so I give you my word on behalf of our council that I will be doing whatever I can to make this more action oriented, and we'll find a way to communicate that back to you. Thank you so much for your stories and your braveness and your courage and your willingness to work with us. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to say my not being there in person is certainly no reflection on what we're dealing with this evening. I've been following the advice of my doctors when it comes to dealing with the pandemic that hopefully we're seeing the start to recede and I guess get into a better place. But currently, her strong words to me were you should not be indoors with groups of people. So unfortunately, I had to attend this evening virtually. But as I said, it's certainly no reflection on what we're dealing with this evening. Secondly, I would like to say thank you to those that had the courage and the fortitude to stand up this evening and share stories that I'm sure were very, very difficult to share. It's appreciated. I can say as one person, I've learned a lot this evening that I didn't know before the evening started, and I thank them for that. I would further like to say, Mr. Mayor, that I would like to think this is not a debate on a resolution, but it's really an affirmation of our, as a City of Brantford, commitment to work with our neighbors to assist them in obtaining the documents that they need to move forward with the work that they must do. And I'm proud to support this. And I think it's been said earlier that this could be a template. I'm sure it will be a template. And I think the moment is not lost, I don't think, on any of us, the significance of what's going on this evening. And I would hope this is a first small step on what will, I'm sure, be a long journey. But if it doesn't, that first step doesn't occur, the next step won't. So I'm pleased to support this, and I would encourage all to support it, and I'm sure this will be a unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Vancouver.
Some time ago, around 2007, this is kind of a bit for Geronimo because he mentioned the Odeon. He didn't get to go there. Where I happened to go to the Odeon, but it was in the hands of Laurie at this time, and there was a group presenting there, and they were called TRUE, and it's called Truth Through Understanding and Education. TRUE. And they would bring in speakers regarding incidents that were happening within the Native communities. I remember Jan Vandersel. I don't think either of us were counselors back then, but I recall seeing Jan in the audience for a few of these. And one of the speakers at one time was Kevin Annette, and he had heard through his congregation in British Columbia. He had a ragtag congregation, I guess, and people that had suffered, and they told their stories, and he learned to believe those stories. And he brought those stories to the Odeon. Those stories were about children that disappeared. And it was of his mindset from the stories that he heard here that the same had happened in Brantford. There were many people in that Odeon, but there were very few from the community of Brantford. There were many people from the Native community, from Six Nations, Haudenosaunee. Men's Fire stood up. They knew. And this was going around the time that Stephen Harper was bringing forth the apology. But what caught me was that the United Church minister became shunned, probably something you might all be familiar with. Shunned because what he thought was true. And here we are some 13 years later, when he was also trying to retell some of your stories. Those stories for everyone became true out west, and we saw that wave coming towards us, and it would only make logical sense that the children are here somewhere and they must be found. The other story I have that was mentioned in your presentations, Romeo Saginaw He was on a quest following another person that he had admired and became friends of. When he told his story to this man named Jack Layton, when Jack passed away, Romeo wanted to take his spot. Romeo Saginash, his family, his brothers and sisters had been taken away. They went to Sault Ste. Marie, and one went to the Mohawk Institute. Romeo came to Brantford for the first time when he was looking to be the leader of a political party, and he was at the Mohawk Institute. And he was doing just, a general meet and greet with the public and a speech and saying why. But we know afterwards, we planned this, it's something that hit him hard. It hit him harder than he could imagine. It really hit him hard because it all came home while he was in that building. But one of the things that he mentioned to us is that he said he was going to be able to tell his mother that he saw where his brother went to school. He'd never seen his brother again from the time he was taken away. But he was able to say this. I was able to see the school. But this had a profound effect on him. So I don't think there are words from our side. There can only be actions. And let these be the actions. I'm sure that this council will be listening to all the advice, direction, and input from the Survivor Secretariat, from the members of the Six Nations community, and from those that came from abroad, from across Canada. I think you listed the places between Quebec and Ontario from where people came to come here, and from people that were in Six Nations that were sent elsewhere. It doesn't pass this sniff test to say that something can run for over 150 years. We know regular incidents happen, and there has to be a place, and it has to be found. It's going to need money. We're going to have to find out how we can get provincial and federal governments to support this. The area is huge. The records could help. The records could help immensely. The area that we have to scope in here is, I will wrap up, it's significantly larger than some of the others, and therefore more reason to support this. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Councillor Sicoli.
I'll be much shorter, I promise. And I'm very grateful this evening for waterproof eyeliner. I was racking my brain on what I could possibly say to this resolution this evening. And then it occurred to me that I don't think tonight is about me saying or us saying. I think tonight is about listening and learning. And so I want to thank everybody who came out, and especially our presenters, for deepening my understanding, and I'm sure most of the councillors' understanding of what happened. So as a mother, from my heart to yours, I hope that this resolution tonight will help uncover a little bit more of that ugly truth, so that you can find reconciliation and just bring you one step closer to peace. And that is all I'm going to say on this. Thank you so much. I will absolutely be supporting this resolution this evening.
Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. Well, many years ago, I was a kid and I'm a parent, and I couldn't even begin to place myself in the position that survivors and their folks faced. Couldn't even begin to do that. Wouldn't want to begin to do that. Your words are powerful. I think back to a time when I was young, when there was a relationship between Six Nations kids and kids from Brantford. I used to go out there and play lacrosse. We always got our asses kicked out there, but it was good sport and good sportsmanship, and I had a lot of people that I associated with out there, and similarly here, right? And now I think to my time on this council, and it's been marked by animosity. It's been marked by hard feelings to a large extent, and that's been fueled by some opinions on both sides of that county border. So we've spent the last number of years here buttressing and fighting and Then along comes Joshua Wall. And Joshua Wall has some strong connections, and Joshua Wall has introduced the resolution that brought us Lucas. He introduced the resolution that brought us all together here tonight. This is a man who's a leader and who's leaving a lasting legacy for our two communities. He's brokered a go forward point for us here tonight. And I think as days go by and weeks go by and years go by, those of us that were in the room tonight can think back to when everything changed for the two communities, okay? We've got nowhere to go but forward. You know that we give you our full support tonight. You've asked what else, it was asked what else we can do for you. Maybe think on that. And there may be some other things that you'd like to come forward with. Again, I think we're moving beyond the two solitudes the two communities have faced off against each other for the last couple of decades. I think there may be some more ideas coming forward with respect to things that the corporation of the city of Brantford can introduce to better the relationship. It's looking up. We're there for you. And let's be friends.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. I'd like to say a few words myself. So in my journey as mayor, I first came to it with an approach reflecting my background as a lawyer, very analytical, very legal, very rational. The one thing I've learned as mayor for the last 3.5 years is diminishing that and listening to emotion. The soul, as I said to Diane, I felt she was speaking to me through her soul. And that actually has much more meaning and much more of an impact. I've come to realize that. So when I look at the motion that's on the floor, confining it tonight to the issue of records. So the lawyer part of me looks to the Truth and Reconciliation report and what guidance does it give us? And it does specifically note, and Scott touched on it, that there is reference to the archival records and the importance of there being full disclosure of all the records for the purpose of reconciliation. In fact, at page 271 of the report, the commission wrote that the commission believes that assisting families to learn the fate of children who died in residential schools, locating unmarked graves and maintaining, protecting, and commemorating residential school cemeteries are vital to healing and reconciliation. Archives and government departments and agencies have a crucial role to play in this process. Equally important, archival records can help survivors, their families, and communities to reconstruct their family and community histories. Yet, access to such holdings has been problematic. So we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission telling us this is important. Then having had a tour of the residential school here in town back in 2017, then I began to think about how important this is to the children and their souls, and came to understand, and I hope I don't misdescribe it, but I think I understand it, the essence of it, the Mohawk Haudenosaunee funeral tradition, which is the ancestors from the afterlife coming to help guide the person who has died or dying, and the living relatives gathering to assist them in making the transition to the next life, or what we would call the afterlife. And, having these children who their families were stripped from them, their identities were stripped from them, giving them numbers, who in many cases could not see their family for many years, who had their culture stripped from them, and now in death, stripped of the ascendancy to the afterlife. And so when understood a little bit, it was Lucas that helped me do this. I thought, there's a good legal reason for this. It's part of the path of reconciliation, but it's helping these children and their souls, which must be in turmoil in terms of the process. I assume, I think correctly, that helping to locate their remains and understanding more of their history and what happened to them will help their families, will help their communities and their nations, because there are many nations that attended, but also help them and their souls. And if it's really about every child, every matters, we can't forget that. And so to me, it's that soul in me that sometimes I didn't know I had prior to becoming mayor. I know I had, but anyways. So that to me really resonates and why this resolution meant so much to me. And yes, thank you, Councillor Wall, for bringing this forward. It's another fine example of some great leadership that you've demonstrated and that throughout this term of council, many have in any particular issue demonstrated. So I'm very happy to support this, both my brain, my head, and my soul. So, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to speak to Geronimo, Diane, Don first. I can't speak for council, but as the elder in my family, of my children and my grandchildren, I want to apologize and say how sorry I am for what suffering that you went through at a residential school. Suffering on needlessly. I want to say as well to the community out at large, there's a lot we can do. We can't have reconciliation without truth. So the truth needs to come. There's a lot more this council can do. We can educate our people about the truth because it's not being said enough. Your stories, what happened, the process, trying to genocide a whole culture. It needs to be told to everyone in our community. The truth needs to be told to everyone. It needs to be taught in their schools. Everyone needs to know so we don't do this ever again. It's the only way we're going to learn and have reconciliation and respect and love for each other is if we understand the truth of what happened. There is no reconciliation without truth. And there's lots that we can do as a city to tell that truth every chance we get. So on behalf of my family, I do deeply apologize and we'll do whatever we can. I have some members of council that they learned something here today. I knew this from the last time I was at the school talking to survivors. And I apologize then. I was a little boy riding my banana seat bike around that neighborhood and I had no idea what was going on right across the street from where I was riding my bike. No idea whatsoever. I was living the dream as a young free child right in the neighborhood in Eagle Place. And I had no idea. When I found out, I was brokenhearted that I didn't know then. What could I do? So now we can do something and we can continue to do something together. And that's what we'll do. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the courage and the strength and the honesty of your stories. Thank you for the challenge to become allies again or a better ally. And thank you for helping us understand with your patience and your wisdom how we can polish that silver chain and do a better job of it on a regular basis. As a grandfather of a wee little Mohawk man and a father-in-law of another Mohawk man on the territory, in the bush, as they say, I do have a foot firmly planted in two boats. And that's always been the case through my first term of council, second term of council, and every day in between. I've spent a lot of time on the territories with good people who have a terrific and a wonderful sense of humor. So much beauty and so much growth in so many people. There are so many reasons I have to support this. I want to support this. But the most important reason is on a personal note, some of the travesties that have been experienced are common to all victims, all survivors who are trying to become thrivers. And as you're going through your personal journeys of discovery about truth, truth is hard to come by. And I've watched and listened to survivor stories from first and second and third generations now since 96, 97. And the truth is hard to come by. And it feels like the partial truth and reconciliation movement. That's what it feels like to me, because you can never get a handle on the full truth. This may take that step. This may be the fire that needs to be lit in order to open all the books. I certainly hope it is, because what it will do, it's critical to the next healing process. And again, I thank you for your strength, your courage. Please, when you head back and you talk to the other survivors or the thrivers, please extend to them the thankfulness for your courage and your strength, telling your story. Thank you.
Right. Madam Clerk? Oh, Councillor Wells.
It's clear from this meeting and from the events of today that truthful conversation is the way forward. And I want to sincerely thank you with every fiber of my being for coming here today and sharing your truths. And it is the intent of this motion for truthful conversation to come from all sides, from everyone who was involved in anything to do with the residential schools. And I believe that it is the hope of this motion that the government of Canada will be truthful and release these documents. Nyawa.
Councillor McCurry, do you have an amendment?
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor. And I'll read it and hopefully it'll be friendly. The amendment reads that item 5.1 be amended to include a call upon the Anglican Church to release all documents in their archives within Clause A, the circulation to Linda Nichols, primate of the Anglican Church within Clause B.
Friendly or not?
Yes.
Seconder?
Yes.
All right, friendly. Which, just so you know, that means that the original resolution has now been amended to include the direction to the Anglican Church. Thank you, Councillor McCrory. So with that, Madam Clerk, we have this amended by friendly amendment. No further speakers. Please take the vote.
It's yes for me.
Item 5.1, release of all federal and provincial documents related to the former Mohawk Institute Residential School has carried on a recorded vote of 9-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Coley, Vanderstout, Sless, McCurry, Carpenter, and Toski, Van Tilburg, Wall, Mayor Davis.
And now we'll move forward to bylaws. And you heard a resolution that just passed unanimously, but until it's actually become a bylaw, it's not a full formal motion or resolution or action of this council. So we're going to move into bylaws to confirm what we just done. And Councillor Coley, if you could please move the motion for first and second reading of the bylaw.
Yep, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Vanderstout, that leave be given to the mover and seconder to introduce the following bylaw for first and second reading. 74-2022 bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brantford with respect to the special meeting held on May 17th, 2022.
Thank you. Any discussion on first and second reading? Saying none. Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Yes.
Yes.
The first and second reading of bylaw 74-2022 is carried on a recorded vote of 9-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Coley, Vanderstelt, McCurry, Carpenter, and Toski, until Bork-Wall. Mayor Davis.
And because the bylaw is never passed finally until it has third reading, Councillor Vanderstelt, do you have the motion for the resolution for third reading?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That bylaw 74-2022, having received a first and second reading, be taken as read a third time and be finally passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Scully.
That is correct.
All right. Any discussion on third reading? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote on third reading?
Third and final reading of bylaw 74-2022 is carried on a recorded vote of 9-0. Those voting in favor, Councillors Sokoli, Vanderstelt, McCurry, Carpenter, and Toski, Ventil, Bork-Wall. Mayor Davis.
All right, that brings our one item special council meeting to a unanimous end. Once I actually sign the bylaw. And the meeting is hereby formally adjourned. And thank you very much.